So what does motivation do to us? Motivation energizes, directs, and sustains the behavior. So looking at all this, what does it tell you? What does it tell you about motivation? That we need it in everyday life. It is very important. You can't think of a behavior that it doesn't require motivation, right? Motivation and emotion. We're going to spend the coming few minutes in these slides trying to see what is the link or the relation between motivation and emotion. Now, previously, you've taken, and we're going to come back to these perspectives, we studied the behaviorism school. Remember, right at the beginning? And the behaviorism school depends on what? On observing anything external, okay? Any behavior that's external that you can see and you can measure or you can predict. And also you're giving incentive rewards. Whereas in motivation, when we talk about emotions, what did we say about emotions?
Something we cannot measure.
Remember the iceberg, the EQ and the IQ? I've given you an example, and I said the EQ is just like the iceberg. A lot of the iceberg, the biggest portion of it is under the water, hidden, very deceiving, you cannot see it, right? And you've got the little bit that is above, so you have to dig into it. Emotions are just the same. If you notice here, it's an internal state or a condition that activates and gives a direction to our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Emotions, they could be positive or they could be negative emotions in reaction to stimuli what? Any that are accompanied by physiological arousals and related behavior. There is a motive to kill the hunger you have in you. So they can be from very basic physiological needs. I'm hungry, I need to eat. What is the motive here? It's the hunger. You need to satisfy those cravings. You need to satisfy your need to eat. You're feeling cold, you need to put some more clothes on to warm yourself up, right? You're thirsty, you need to drink. You cannot breathe because you need more air, you need more oxygen. So that's what it means, from very physiological, basic things, but they are survival needs, to the more essential, the other complicated things as cognitive processes and things that we've been taking on. So motivation, it's very important for us here in the academic system, right? Here specifically, it's very general. We're looking at it at the beginning from a very general scope, but we need to narrow down our information and discussion about motives and emotions. In general here, we need to specifically talk about what? How do we need it in the classroom? How do we need it in the academic system? How can we use it as teachers? Motivations and emotions are closely linked. Why? Because motives often accompanied by emotions. To the motive to win the race is accompanied by anxiety. This person has a motive, they want to win the race. But what the feelings that comes with it? Anxiety. And we've got another common term that we always use in the academic field, test anxiety, right? We have tests, it's accompanied with anxiety. Anything that you want to win, you want to succeed, you want to do some sort of distinguished accomplishments in it, it's related with emotions. It's just like when you say, when I have an interview, or I need to stand in front of a public and throw a speech, or I'm going in a conference to present a paper, what are the things? You express it actually with the physiological expressions, right? You say, I've got butterflies in my tummy. I've got these spasms in my stomach. Or you would say, I've got a headache, which is unexplainable. Or I feel I have palpitation and I'm short of breath. Okay, what are these? Or some people could have sweaty palms in their hands. What are all these feelings or emotions? They are all related to your need to succeed and achieve. The motives are giving that energy. This energy is described in these feelings in your body. Emotions have motivational properties of their own. A person who suffered from drug withdrawal symptoms and his life was messed up, would want to help others. That's why in group therapies, when we bring people for group therapies, who do we use? We use people who had a previous experience and they were out of the situation. So heavy smokers, people who are addicted to smoking, people who were on drugs, people who had bad car accidents because they were speeding or not using the seat belts. When you want to raise awareness or you want to help other people, those are the sort of people who would actually volunteer, or you would bring them up to talk to other people. Why? Because they're the best to talk about it. They've been through the experience. Okay? Now let's look at the motivated and the full idea of motivation and the emotional brain. So the brain is not only for thinking, but the brain is the center of motivation and emotion. If you use the thinking brain, the cognitive and intellectual functions, the question would be, what task is it doing? When you're talking about the motivated brain, whether you want to do it or not. If you're talking about, again, the emotional brain, what's your mood while you're doing it? Can you look at the questions on this slide? What differences do you notice? It's all talking about tasks and how do you go about the task, but what do you notice in these questions? Yes.
The first one is ask about the kind of task. The second one, ask about the desire of doing the task. The third one, ask about your emotion to do this task.
Okay, the titles say it. Here we're doing a lot of thinking and cognitive processes, so all the task is, how are you going to do it? So again, like we just studied, there will be steps, structured step towards solving, like we talked about solving a problem. How will you go about it? How will you do it? So their concern is, how will you get to your goal? Whereas in the motivated brain, we are talking about what? Is there a desire? Is there a need? Is there a reason why you want to do it? We come to the emotional brain. How's your mood today? How do you feel about it? And this is normal in everyday life, when sometimes you say, I don't feel too good today. I don't feel I want to work, right? I don't feel as energetic as I usually do. We all have these ups and downs. We all have these days when we don't feel so good about ourselves, don't we? Which just tells you, sometimes we do push ourselves to do things, or we need to be pushed by others to do things. And the whole topic today is about how can we shift from actually having external rewards and external incentives into actually having long-lasting, like we said. And if we want to have sustained ones, we need to work on the internal state. It needs to come from within you. So this motivation mechanism can be called different things. You can call it a habit, a belief, a desire, an instinct, a need, an interest, a compulsion, or a drive. No matter whatever you call this, whatever you want to label it, this is motivation. Okay? That prompts us to take an action, and the motivation comes from the verb to move. Again, it's a move forward. Motivation is not moving backward, it's always moving forward, energizing something, giving it a push. Just like we did in chapter 1, remember? You've seen this before. We discussed the different approaches in learning from different perspectives. Today, these perspectives, we're discussing them according to motivation. How are they linked with motivation? Let's see the behaviors of the school. So the behavioral perspective, knowing that it depends a lot on external, like we said, rewards, external punishments. What does it say, the incentives? Positive or negative stimuli or events that can motivate students' behavior. They add interest or excitement to the class. So the teacher can say, well done, can give the student a star, can give them a more bonus time to play in the time to go out, can give them an extra grade, can do. All these are external rewards. Or the opposite, they could get detention, they could be asked not to go, actually the opposite, to an activity or something. So it sees students' motivation as a consequence to external incentive. I give you the external incentives, you are motivated to work. That's what it means. We look at these examples. If you want the child to pray every day, just because the child will do it if you promise to take the child to the cinema. So the child is praying every day because they know their reward will be going to the cinema. Or it will be having petty cash, which they can buy something they want. Or you will be getting them whatever you promised them with, or a trip, or a birthday, or going out with friends, and so on. Teachers work hard prior to issuing the annual report. Where did you see this before? We've discussed this before. Where did you see it? You need to study. We're in week 14. Where did you see this? Teachers work hard prior to issuing the annual report. This was in chapter 7, when we were talking about the applied behavior analysis. It was about the schedules of reinforcement. Remember? We said, do we use the fixed or the variable ratio or interval? Why do we need to use the variable? Because it is unpredictable, unexpected. It won't happen that people will work only before the annual. So you see what the behavioral does? It's an external incentive. They will only work when they're waiting for the annual report. They will go back and they'll fall to their lazy whatever pattern if this is taken away. A child drinks the soup only when the mom is at home. That's why, yes, this behavioral is important, but it's not enough. You cannot always depend. What if the mother is not around, there is no annual report, the child needs to keep on praying for life? How can you keep energizing the behavior so people will work, so the outcome is good and productivity? Remember, even in the observational learning, it has 4 steps. Attention, retention, production, motivation. Motivation was there in the 4th one, so this is not the first time we hear about motivation. It's very important, like we said, to energize any behavior. Let's look at the humanistic. The humanistic perspective is for whom? We've taken this before as well. You've seen this. It is for Maslow, and shows students' capacity of personal growth, freedom to choose their destiny, and positive quality. This is the hierarchy of Maslow, and basically people need to move with their motives. Like I gave you examples, there is a motive that you're hungry, so you go and fetch food, or you're feeling cold, or you're very tired and exhausted, you need to go and have a power nap or sleep, all these things, until you go to the most complicated things which come with experience, with matureness, and with over a time as people pass from one developmental stage to the other, and they meet people and they interact. Some people, if their motives are not strong, they don't pass these. They just get stuck somewhere here. Yeah? Especially when you start in the green zone, you start belonging. It means family is not the only relation and direct relation. Children start going outside the house. There's a lot of anxieties in that. They start making their own friends. They start observing their own world. They start discovering. They meet the good people, the bad people, and they have to learn. And their personalities have to strengthen. So it's very important that we have strong motives. So the humanistic say that we need to satisfy these needs to move from one stage to the other. But to move from one zone to the other, you need strong motives. The cognitive perspective, as we've done it, and we've done a lot of chapters on the cognitive, mainly is directed by what? It's very organized steps, right? It's always planning and structuring things. You need your goals, you need to set your goals, you need to understand where your goals are, and then what do you do with these goals? You need to put plans, put the plan in action, monitor them, study them, and then evaluate them and re-evaluate, and you go on with your things. So students' thought guide their motivation. You notice here, it's the thoughts, it's not the emotions, it's the thoughts. It's not the need, it's not the instinct, it's not the desire, it's the way you think. So it's an internal motivation to achieve. The attribution comes because of success and failure. Did you work hard to succeed, or you didn't work hard so you failed? And we're going to look at the attribution through the theory more, what it means. So the attribution is not because the exam was hard, or because my luck is bad, or because my parents pushed me to do this. Everything else is external. With people who depend on their thinking and thought as a guide, they do a lot of internal and attributions. Effectively control their environment. So there is a control over things. Where is the locus? The locus is internal, it is not external. Where is the attribution? It is to success or failure. So a lot of it depends on your work as an individual. Where is the control? You control the environment around you, not the environment controls you. Makes a big difference. So these are the thoughts from the cognitive perspective. Then we look. So they believe external pressure should be made less important. So they are different than the behaviors in school. Also, students should be given more opportunities, responsibilities in controlling their achievements and outcome. That's exactly what Bandura said in his social cognitive about self-efficacy, the ability to master situations and get with the best outcomes. So you are in control, the individual. Also, like I've just said, these are the important steps when you go to it. The last one in the perspective is the social perspective here. What do they say? They say people are motivated by being around others. So part of us, and we discussed this also when we were talking about emotional intelligence, remember? We were talking about our needs to connect with others. We keep talking about peer pressures, and that when you get to school or you get to university or you get to work, you have to form a new community. You have to form friends, and you have to learn skills of how to get along with friends or with people also. Your leader, your supervisor, right? Or your boss at work, you have to get along with people. Instead of thinking in a solo way, in an individual way, you start to think in groups. And it's always very challenging and difficult. It's a different sort of skill. How can you get along with others? At schools, students start forming what? Student clubs. So your role here as a teacher is to help students, guide them, direct this behavior. If you are with the social perspective, is how to form student clubs and how to work together. Why is it important? Because really positive relationships in life is where we interact with others. And I keep telling you this, at schools, you need to see those three together. The child is a very important role and individual in this whole academic system. The teacher plays a big role in it, of course, and there is a direct contact between the teacher and the children themselves, child to child, as friends and peers and all that, but also it's very important to have the parental involvement. We need the parents on board. Why do we need the parents on board? We said for many reasons, because they know a lot about the child, they've spent long hours. What we get from the mother, especially what we call the natural observations, a lot of the special needs, disorders, disabilities, or any other problems are found first by moms. They're the first ones to spot these things. So a lot of history about the family, backgrounds, things like that you need. And also sometimes, like we said, if you have special intervention for the children, or you need to apply a special thing, you need to make sure that there's a harmony between the school and the home. You don't want that the school does something and at home you're confusing the child. You need to go all in the same direction. So these social believe that we need a lot of interaction between all these. So the first part was about defining the motivation. It was about talking about the emotional and the brain, and we were trying to see the different four perspectives. Now we will be focusing on the types of the motivation and the theories of motivation, and a bit at the end there are some parts that I'm not going to go through because we've already done self-efficacy and goal settings. You know already this. We've revised it. There are the other chapters, but I need to focus on the first three specifically here with you. Let's look at the difference between the learning theorists and the motivational theorists. These people say they focus on what can people do and learn. These are the learning theorists. نظريات التعلم. What does it say? What can people do and learn? Whereas, look at the second one, motivation theorists. What do they focus on? Again, look at the way the questions are put. How likely are people to do what they're capable of doing and to learn what they're capable of learning? Yeah? So, we've learned that in motivation, now we're going to put all the words and the definition together. It's an internal state that energizes, directs, and sustains a behavior, and it gets people moving from a particular points them in a particular direction and keeps them going. And the last thing is the most important, keep them going, actually. You have to think as a teacher, how can you keep your students motivated? How can you keep them interested in what they're doing? How can you attract their attention, knowing that there is a diversity and there are lots of individual variations and differences among them? And this also happens at home. When you have a child who's a teenager, and you've got children in the middle childhood, okay, or the late, and then you've got a little baby who's toddler, 0 to 2 roughly, or 3 to 6 preschool. Now that you know and you study the developmental changes and it keeps coming in every chapter, we know that the characteristics, the traits, the needs of each age group is different. A challenging question to you, how can you accommodate these three categories? 3 to 6, 7 to 12, 12 to 18, how can you deal with all these? We know that they've got different moods, different personalities, they behave differently, they have different needs. This is a challenging question. The same question is thrown back at the teachers. How can you work on that? Your target to come out of this lecture is to think all the time, how can you stimulate, how can you motivate, and how can you keep this behavior, the active achievement behavior, the active learner that we've been talking about, the interested learner, okay, the inquisitive learner, the one who loves to discover, to discuss, to debate, to do projects. How can you keep them going?